Hello and welcome everyone to week 2 of MPA 590 Organizational Theory. My name is Greg Zarko, and this week we will be discussing classic organizational theories and my hypothetical task force. Okay, so before we get started, I want to just announce that I have switched my task force. I went from a early child development task force to now an emergency response task force. I went with something that I'm a little more familiar with. Um, Also, it was a little hard for me to incorporate some of the theories and positions with child development in such a short notice for a week. Um, so I go in with something I'm familiar with. I do live in Hesperia. It's considered the high desert. We share borders with the city of Victorville and Adelanto and Apple Valley. And the high desert is just so spread out. And a lot of the places up here are incorporated. Um, so they don't have any city services and get services provided by the county, and therefore EMS response calls are sometimes late or not available, depending if it's a dirt road or at night if there's no light fixtures. Um, so, I, so my task force, the High Desert Emergency Response Team, would help solve some of those problems. It would be spearheaded by uh, the city manager of the city of Victorville. It is the oldest city out of the four that I talked about. And each city would volunteer a department. The purpose of this task force would be to educate and train civilians, volunteers that would like to respond to uh, emergencies other than the normal emergencies. I'm not trying to say normal, but like a 94 earthquake type of response or something where there's a huge fire. Um, and in the winter here, because we're close to the mountains, sometimes people get lost, and something like a search and rescue. Um, so the city of Victorville would lead the department. The city of Apple Valley would volunteer their fire department to include their paramedics and other EMS services. The city of Hesperia would volunteer their police department. Um, and the members of the task force would also include two local nonprofits, Van Connect, which I am a part of. We do have a bus, so we would volunteer the bus services um, to the emergency response team in case people need to be evacuated from a certain location. We do have that availability. Also, I have incorporated another nonprofit up here. They're in Victorville. They are the Victor Valley Community Service Council. They also do they provide services for seniors and elderly, but they also have a bus. And so with the two buses, we were able to evacuate people. And then at the very end, I added the American Red Cross to come in towards the end and provide water and blankets and food to anybody that may need it. So moving forward, this will be my task force. Max Weber had a desire to find the one best way to achieve efficiency in a bureaucracy, and so I have set up my task force with this in mind. And since it's hypothetical, I tried to model it after Weber's ideal type of bureaucracy. Weber believed that a structured bureaucracy has laws, rules, and regulations, and therefore that made it more rational. So by dividing work into specialized administrative functions and by assigning each function to a specific department, I am able to arrange those departments and create a hierarchy of authority. The top of the pyramid being led by the city manager of Victorville, who would then delegate on-site authority to both the chief of police, who would handle the security and control portion of the emergency, and to the fire chief, who would be in charge of the actual situation. Um, I also included a security company into the members of the task force because after things start to settle down, it's not the job of the police to provide security or to structures or to the situation. So I did include a local security company. Uh, the chief of police would be the highest member on site. I'm sorry, the fire department would be the highest member on site who would make on site decisions, which would be based on the systems of rules in place or any other standard operating procedures that have been documented in writing beforehand. I have also set up my task force with the administrative management theories of school in mind because structural and administrative rationality are the primary values that I'd like my task force to be based off. A chain of command and following the authority on site is key for any mission or objective to be completed. By using the division of labor, I can create and focus on each department's expertise and minimize the time that is wasted on indecisiveness and waiting for an authority figure to make a decision. And this is achieved at the top of the pyramid when the city manager delegates the authority to the chiefs, and at the bottom of the pyramid where the nonprofits, arrive, and their role is to provide transportation to anyone who may need to be relocated or evacuated. It would cause problems if the bus driver for a nonprofit found themselves digging up a fighting position or running into an emergency situation. As far as motivational strategies are concerned, the task force has a combination of legal appliance, which would apply to the public servants, and the job identification strategy, which would be applied to the nonprofits and the Red Cross employees, who it is assumed that they take those jobs in those fields because it is believed that the individual receives some type of satisfaction from the service the work provides. Another theorist that will no doubt have a strong influence on my task force is Frederick W Taylor, who also believed in efficiency and productivity. Except unlike Weber, who focused on the organization, Taylor focused on the job itself. By using Taylor's scientific management and assigning each participating organization a middle manager, the responding task force can successfully apply a span of control over their team. So the nonprofits who focus on driving can have their middle manager can focus on having the driver just drive, while the aid and litter teams can focus on providing aid to those in need, either by CPR or water, whatever the case may be. Within each department, there will be a standardization of work that applies. For example, the fire department's response will consist of a water truck with however many people are in a water truck, a paramedic unit, and a chief vehicle. So it's 3 different vehicles with the potential of up to 7 people. By standardizing each individual department, they can become proficient in their own tasks and duties. And it is good to keep in mind that no 2 emergencies are the same, so a certain level of flexibility must be allowed when responding. Katz and Kahn discuss this in their article, but in my opinion, the flexibility must come from the top and not the subordinates on the bottom. To be efficient, those placed in positions of authority must be in the know at all times, or as much as possible. Merton touches on the friction that may arise in bureaucratic structure, but by each department and individual knowing their role in the chain of command, the respect for the positions for those in authority should and will be respected. This ties in with the members of the task force keeping those that are in charge informed. So this week we touch on a couple of the early theories that will have an influence on my task force. Um, we discussed a little bit about Max Weber, Frederick W. Taylor, Katz and Kahn, and very lightly on Merton. Um, so thank you for listening to my presentation this week. I'm excited to hear yours. Um, Good luck, be safe, and God bless.